Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. And good morning, everyone who's joining us online and live streaming. So my name is Esmira Javier, and I'm a climate change finance specialist from the Asian Development Bank. And welcome to this side event. And I'm so sorry for some who are actually here that it's quite early, but I'm glad to see some people. So let's start it off from an opening remarks to welcome us all. Actually, my boss, Ms. Noelle O'Brien, who is the Director for Climate Change at the Asian Development Bank. Noelle was actually a principal climate change specialist for the Pacific region and has worked on expanding ADB's work on mitigation investments and scaling up adaptation investments in at least 14 Pacific member countries, as well as raising climate finance. So Noelle holds a natural science degree from Trinity College in Dublin and master's degree in applied environmental science and development management, and has worked with the Mekong River Commission, the Center for Peoples and Forests, and a number of international organizations in Southeast Asia and Africa. Noelle?
Thank you very much, Esmira. So good morning, esteemed colleagues, delegates, and climate advocates. I think we'll have a little competition with next door. So good morning to everybody who's managed to make it here, and also to those of you who are online. It is with a profound sense of responsibility and urgency that I stand before you, representing the Asian Development Bank, to welcome you to this session. All of us gathered here today are aware that the measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation is a complex process. However, in the context of climate action, the undertaking is as indispensable as it is intricate. The 2015 Paris Agreement set forth a transformative path for our global community, introducing two pivotal enhancements to the MRV framework: the reporting of progress on NDCs and the establishment of an enhanced transparency framework. These elements are not merely procedural, they are the cornerstones of our collective accountability and the instruments through which we can successfully address climate change. The main purpose of the NDC MRV system is to transparently demonstrate progress made towards the targets defined in the NDC, such as GHG emissions and GHG impacts, tracking the progress made in the implementation of mitigation and adaptation actions, and tracking the use and results of means of implementation and support, such as capacity building and technical assistance, technology transfer, and finance. In addition, non-greenhouse gas impacts in the aspects of environment, social, and economic of the NDC actions that would lead to transformational change in the country should be captured by the MRV system. At ADB, we recognize the importance of these developments and have been actively engaging with our developing member countries. Our approach is rooted in understanding that transparency is not a mere compliance exercise. It is a strategic facilitator of trust and cooperation among nations. It allows for the clear identification of where we are, where we need to be, and what support is required to bridge the gap. Our commitment to enhancing MRV systems spans across numerous initiatives. We have mobilized resources and designed instruments that assist our member countries in strengthening their MRV capabilities. This means not just meeting international reporting requirements, but on also ensuring that these systems serve the broader purpose of informing climate policy and sustainable development strategies. The diversity of support needed by our member countries underscores the importance of MRV systems that can adapt to varied national policies while maintaining a standard of rigor and comparability. We at ADB have learned that MRV systems must not only accommodate diverse policy environments, but also be robust enough to guide countries in demonstrating tangible progress in areas such as low-emission development strategies and national adaptation plans and actions. Our efforts have been multifaceted, ranging from upstream policy engagement, helping shape conducive environments for the MRV systems, to downstream practices, providing the technical know-how for their operation. We've seen firsthand the emerging opportunities presented by technology advances and innovative financing mechanisms that can significantly enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the systems. Today's side events will share these experiences, drawing lessons from the successes and challenges faced by national governments, development finance institutions, and our partners in international aid. We will discuss the key resources that have proven instrumental and the levers of change that, when pulled, catalyze advancement in this critical field. As we engage in these discussions, let us remember that MRV is not merely about metrics and data. It is about building a reliable and resilient framework that enables us to honor our commitments, to measure the impact of our actions, and to ensure that every step we take moves us closer to our main goal, a sustainable and equitable future for all. Thank you for your commitment to this crucial endeavor. The journey ahead may be challenging, but with robust MRV systems, we can better pave the way for effective climate action that rises to meet the aspirations of the Paris Agreement and the needs of our planet. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Noelle. And I have my mask on back because I want to survive the entire panel discussion. But before we proceed, let me introduce our very busy but has found time to join the panel today. Let me start from my farthest right. Joaquim Liete. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's okay.
Almost, okay. He is actually the head of climate finance at the NDC partnership, where he oversees and coordinates finance-related initiatives. His work actually focuses on fast-tracking the implementation of NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, and Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, by mainstreaming climate into development plans, public financial management systems, and investment portfolios, and mobilizing public and private finance for member countries. Hi, Joaquim. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sitting next to him is actually an old friend, an old MDB acquaintance, Mr. Oleg Bulani. He is the Senior Program Officer from the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. ICAT strategies, he coordinates the development and implementation of ICAT's strategies and regional and country project. He has hands-on experience in climate finance, MRV, and carbon markets. Good morning, Oleg.
Good morning.
Good morning. Next to him is also an old acquaintance, Ms. Nona Budoyan. She is the Director for Climate Policy Department, Ministry of Environment, Republic of Armenia. As head of the department, her main expertise ensures that the development of state policies, plans, strategies, legal acts, guidelines for climate mitigation and adaptation development of recommendations on the introduction of mechanisms aimed at fulfilling the obligations assumed by international agreements, environmental treaties on climate change. That's a lot of responsibility, Ms. Nona. Good morning. Next to Ms. Nona is actually not Ms. Deborah Sungi, but she has been called to a very important meeting. But we are happy to have one of her colleagues here today, Jason. Jason Panui. He is the MRV officer of the Climate Change and Development Authority of the independent state of Papua New Guinea. Jason is also the country focal point for Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, Global Support Program, and the JHG Inventory focal point for PNG. He has represented the government of PNG in several international climate change dialogues and conferences. Good morning, Jason. And last but not the least is also an old friend, Mr. Turakul Muradov. He is Deputy Director for the Center of Implementation of Investment Projects in the Committee of Environmental Protection under the government of the Republic of Tajikistan. He is also head of the GCF NDA Secretariat. He has over 23 years of experience in the field of environmental protection and climate change. And since 2019, he leads the Secretariat for the National Designated Authority for Engagement in the Green Climate Fund in Tajikistan. Good morning, Turakul. Morning. Oh, you will. Okay. So let's start the ball rolling. So this side event actually will discuss some of the key elements in establishing and implementing MRV systems for NDC implementation and highlight the experiences and learnings of national government, development finance institutions, and other international development partners. So let's start with Joaquim. To start off the discussion. So being from the NDC partnership, what are the range of technical and expert or even financial support that the NDCP provides among its members? And how are the expertise being accessed by developing member countries under NDCP?
Thank you very much. And I want to start by apologizing. I was in the ADB pavilion sitting there. There was a high-level event. I thought it was delayed. Our event was delayed because of the high level. Then I got a message, so I ran here. So apologize for the delay. And I want to start also by thanking for the invitation to be here. MRV systems are very important in the context, of course, of the framework of the convention in terms of reporting emissions and adaptation, but very, very important also the linkages in terms of managing, in terms of development and social and economic elements. So starting with the quick overview of the partnership. So we are a coalition of formed by countries and for countries. So we are 120 member countries and 100 international organizations, including MDB, such as the ADB, UN organizations, and many other specialists that are playing a key role in terms of climate and development across the globe. So the model of the partnership is that countries put forth their priorities, the areas that they want support, and then we mobilize support that in the expertise, technical and financial, from our members. More specifically in terms of MRVs, so MRV has a very strong component in terms of the requests we receive. So since 2017, we have approximately 4,000 requests that were submitted by more than 90 countries. And MRV-related requests represent 24% of all those requests that received. Just last year, we have 384 requests coming through the partnership, and overall, we're talking about 82 countries that are requesting assistance in this area. In terms of the regional distribution, we have Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa specifically, with 42% of all the requests we received, followed by LAC, and interestingly, through the partnership specifically, Asia is still a small component. We had only 2% of all requests on MRVs coming from Asia. The other interesting trend is that between 2021 and 2023, we had like an increase in 6 times in terms of like the requests related to MRVs, and we understand that that's a close connection with the latest developments on the ETF and the clarification and understanding of the countries on where their needs are, and then communicating those needs to access support. In terms of the types of requests that we are getting, so 40% of all the requests, they relate to strengthening institutional arrangements and creating the coordination systems, the mandates, so that the MRVs can be implemented and can be structured in a way that they can collect information from across all the government institutions that are participating, either in terms of collecting data, providing data, compiling data. And then we also have requests focused on data systems and specifically also improving specific sectoral data collection processes, the availability of information. And also recently some trends also in terms of subnational related requests and the connection between subnational and national data to be able to improve the quality of the reporting and the scope of the information. In terms of like the access of support from the partnership, as you mentioned, so it's quite flexible. So as I mentioned, countries can submit requests in any area, provided that there is a clear articulation of what the government is needing and the priorities. And then based on that, then we would work to mobilize support. So we've been working very closely with our members to mobilize support. I think one interesting element that is coming up now with the new NDCs in 2025, there is a specific thematic call that was created by the partnership. So in the last round of NDCs, we supported 67 countries in updating the NDCs, and a lot of that has a very strong connection with data collection, modeling, but also thinking about the systems later on and how you're going to report and monitor and verify your commitments. And now with this thematic call, it's also an opportunity for countries to both submit requests related to MRV in the context of NDCs, but also thinking about the long-term low-emission development strategies. So I will stop there for now.
No, thank you, Joachim. And it's good to know that NDC partnership is looking at, after what happens to global stocktake and how the ambition is going to ramp up after the stocktake. So it's good to know. So Oleg, from your side, what do you think are the key MRV system components that are critical to be assessed in supporting countries to comply with the UNFCCC guidelines?
Good morning to everyone. Thanks, Ismaira, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here among all MDB's friends. I'm now representing the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. It's a small partnership that aims to support developing countries in setting up their MRV frameworks and everything related to compliance with Article 13, which is Enhanced Transparency Framework. But our mission is to go beyond that. It's very much echo what Noel has said in the opening remarks, that MRV frameworks should not be considered merely as a reporting tool. it should be considered as a facilitator and enabler for climate action. So we help countries to assess impact of their policies, build the projections of greenhouse gases, try to mobilize climate finance in a meaningful way to combine the impact from the anticipated investments to the support needed. So with all of that, we provide support globally to all the countries, and we build capacity in the countries. So we believe that the work should be done by the national experts, not by international experts. So we provide it in a form of the country support or the regional support. We have 3 regional hubs so far, one in the countries of Central Asia that covers 5 countries of Central Asia. And also, since we started in 2015, there is a suite of guides and tools that are publicly available to everyone to apply to assess the impact of policies, measures. There are some tools that help to track implementation of NDC, which is also available to everyone to use. Coming back to your question about the critical elements, the enhanced transparency framework has the word enhance, alluding to the fact that transparency been there for quite a while. It started with developed countries under the convention, and now it's been enhanced in a way that it pull together all the elements that been here and there before, like inventories, support needed, and capacity, capacity needs and support needed, and also the elements that need to track the implementation of NDC. So for me, the critical is to ensure that those 3 main pillars of enhanced transparency framework are basically aligned and harmonized in a way that when countries report on NDC tracking, those indicators are anchored in the national GHG inventories. And when, for example, they report on the impact of policies and measures, that impact is calculated against the baselines that also anchored in the national GHG inventories. So that was not fully consistent before, and it's been quite a challenge to make it consistent now. But no one expects that BTRs next year will be 100 perfect. It's like a journey, and countries are expected to enhance their internal capacity and build their experience through the years. Thank you. I'll stop here.
You, Oleg. And I mean, yes, we all know that capacity building, access to tools, access to information is quite critical in actually implementing the MRV system. I might ask you a little bit more on that later on, but let me turn the question to Ms. Nona. So could you share how Armenia's current MRV system is?
Thank you, Esmera. Thank you for having me. Armenia, as a non-annexed party since 1998, properly reporting and has reported 4 national communications, 3 BURs, and 6 greenhouse gas inventories. We can consider all they reports. We can consider as a tool for first step for our MRV. And then after ratification of Paris Agreement, within the Ministry of Environment has established a Department of Climate Policy for emphasizing the importance of climate in the country, and also was revised Interagency Coordinating Council. And now it become more higher, and now it's chaired by Prime Deputy Minister. Actually, the council has responsibility to coordinate and has responsibility to verification policy done. We have the first step done, but we have now legal gap. It's our climate law. after the climate law, we will within the climate law we are trying to strengthen institutionalize the MRV system in Armenia and continuously basis collect greenhouse gas inventory information about finance, about mitigation, and about adaptation policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nora. We might ask you later about some of the lessons learned when you're implementing the MRV system. But I think one of the most critical part that we've seen across countries when they are setting up or even implementing an MRV system is that they have this interagency coordinating committee or council or something to that effect, which actually helps the implementation be smoother and has ability to actually collect all information. But I'll get back to you on that. So coming from Armenia, may I ask Jason to describe a little on how the current MRV system is actually being implemented in Papua New Guinea?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Myra. Firstly, I apologize again for Ms. Sungi not being here. She had to attend to our minister, so I was actually sent to attend this side event. Okay, so for Papua New Guinea, we've already submitted first 2 national communications and 2 biennial update reports. So the first national communication and the second national communication, they were sort of prepared on a consultant basis, project basis. So we've decided to sort of move away from that to more institutionalizing the preparation of these reports. And in 2014, we were able to establish a climate change unit, and then there's a division responsible for preparing these reports, and that's the division that I work for. So we've established that unit, and I think after we established the unit, we sort of also need some sort of technical capacity to actually prepare these reports. So we've seek some support from development partners. They've developed our capacity, and we're able to develop the first biennial update report and second biennial update report, the second biennial update report we submitted last year. Okay, now moving on to the actual framework itself, the actual question that you're asking on. For us, it's more or less like the capacity is in the division that I work with, and we sort of play like a coordination role. We get activity data from the line ministries, sector agencies, that they provide the data to us, and we do the estimation. That's sort of our role. Now the challenge is how do we get those data? Like whether or not they really provide those data to us, or in some instances those data there's no record at all. So that's how do we really deal with that. And some of the data that we used were international sources to estimate our emissions. Then we also use expert judgment, and there were some that we actually collect specific data from sector agencies. So that sort of assisted us to develop inventories and reports. But note that our MRV system is only for, currently the established one is only for inventories and mitigation actions. We still don't have an established MRV framework for support needed or support received, especially financial support that we've received. We don't have an established system to monitor that. And also for the adaptation actions, that's something that's still missing in our MRV framework at the moment.
No, thank you, Jason. Turakul, could you give a similar experience from Tajikistan on establishing the MRV system? And I know we're helping you right now on the roadmap and all. Is it turned on?
It's on?
Yeah.
It's on, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. It's a pleasure to see famous people, and it's a very pleasure to be here, and always it's very useful to have such kind of exchange experience and information between countries on NDC implementation progress and also towards implementation of NDC and to know whether progress is in country members. So in case of Tajikistan, as the same in other countries, under the Paris Agreement, also we adopted enhanced NDC in 2021. So take into account that despite of Tajikistan is one of the lowest GHG emitter, it's 0.02% from the globe contribution. So we also committed to reduce our GHG emission up to 2030. So NDC predict 3 scenarios. It's a baseline scenario, conditional and unconditional scenarios. So based on that, we committed to reduce our GHG emission. But in order to track the progress, we have to have MRV system. But until now, we didn't have the proper MRV system in Tajikistan. That's why with the support of ADB, once NDC implementation plan was, NDC was enhanced and approved and submitted, so ADB provided technical support with the developing, designing of MRV system. So it's worth to note that in September, this document was drafted, was prepared. Now it's in the progress of interministerial review, and we hope that by end of this year it will be adopted, and so we'll move forward to the next step. So the next step will be development, several kind of document roadmaps, and also to enhance it consists of 3 stages. So now it's at early stage, and the next step will be the second stage will be adoption of regulatory frameworks, which aim to improve MRV system for GHG emission. So the last stage will be, it is expected that obligation to submit reports on GHG emissions will be extended to all entities whose emission surpass 50,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. So I hope that once we adopt this MRV document, so with support of ADB or our MDB partners, will continue the implementation, or will start implementation of MRV, and in order to set up the proper and functional MRV in Tajikistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Turakul. Before I ask the next questions, I just wanted to say good morning or good afternoon to those who have joined us online. We are currently around 24 people online, so just to let you know. So Joaquim, you've heard, experiences from 3 countries right now, and each country is in different stages of implementing or developing their MRV system. From the NDCP side, do you actually provide support in all stages of MRV system, from early development or assessment or implementation, or as well as the reporting itself and verification? Can you share also some examples of what NDCP had done in some of its country members?
Thank you for the question. Yep, so the model of the partnership, one of the key principles is country-drivenness. So all the requests that are coming to us, they are officially communicated by our focal points in the government. So our relationship, the way in which we work, is that the governments formulate their priorities, they communicate those to us, and then based on those priorities, we seek support within our membership and beyond. So we have countries that are, as we saw from the experience, that are starting in the process, countries that are more advanced, countries that are strengthening certain components, and all of those can be, requests can be submitted on a rolling basis. So there is no cut line, there is no specific timeline for requests. So the partnership was created as a coalition to provide support to developing countries in getting their climate development priorities and moving towards the priorities that were set by the government. In terms of maybe sharing some of the trends and what we've been observing. So the first one, as I mentioned before, like institutional strengthening. So getting before there is, some countries might request already like a very complex data system or a web portal or something like that. But what we have learned is that it's very important to have the very clear institutional setting, have the right mandates, to have the right responsibilities assigned, and then building on that, you create the systems that are going to be deployed. The second point that I would like to mention also is, for many countries, and we work a lot with low capacity countries, as I mentioned, 42% of all requests on MRV are coming from Africa. It's quite a heavy, it could be quite a heavy burden for them to report and to provide all the information that is required. And one of the things that we observe is like linking the perspective of, and that was mentioned also in the introduction from Noel, is seeing the data collection and the reporting and the process as a system that is integrated with your development perspective. So many countries, a few countries starting to look at that in terms of their national development planning. So how the indicators that you are tracking to see how you are advancing in terms of the national priorities could be linked to then indicators that you need to report for different purposes. So there is a clear kind of like you're not creating a duplicate system, but you're using the national systems that you have for different purposes, and then based on that, you are creating your MRV system. The second thing that I would like to mention also related to is how MRVs will be important also to mobilize finance in many cases. So we see, for example, the evolutions of carbon markets. So how having a strong and solid MRV system, then you can have access to specific sources of finance, such as the carbon markets, but also forward-looking in terms of like, we are seeing more and more transactions that for nature or climate for nature swaps, and then you will need to have very strong monitoring and reporting systems to provide information on how you're progressing. So I think what we've been observing is the more you can connect the MRV system with a clear rationale and a clear core processes that country has in terms of either reporting on the existing systems, but also mobilizing financial resources or performance-based loans or performance-based grants. That's a trend that apparently seems to make a lot of sense, and you have a stronger uptake and buy-in across the different ministries.
Thank you, Joachim. Can I make a follow-up question? Because you've noted that Africa access MRV support around 40% of the total portfolio, and Asia is among one of the lower ones. Being from the Asian Development Bank and our clients are from Asia, do you see, what are the reasons do you think that, is it that Asia is a little bit more ahead on the development of MRV system? Or is it that there are more development or partners that are actually working with them that doesn't need to go through NDC?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there could be a few factors. The first is overall, if you take all the requests that we receive as a partnership, and I mentioned we're talking about a universe of almost 5,000 requests in 2017, Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America are the regions that submit more requests. So I think overall, there are more requests coming from this region. So that could be one in terms of the level of, I think, need and capacity gaps that they have. So we have more requests coming from that region. I think the point that you've mentioned that maybe there is already more support in countries in Asia, so there is like a lower need, or maybe also the other thing that I was thinking, we have a stronger engagement, and we started early on also in Africa and Latin America. We do have several countries engaged also in Asia. I think 26, if I'm not mistaken, the whole region. And overall, I think most of the engagement also started very strongly during the revision of the NDCs. So I think probably, and we provide a lot of support after so the NDCs, but also then translating those into NDC implementation plans, climate investment plan. So maybe that could be also the priorities that are coming to us are more towards this topic. But I think it's a point that, like, especially having the perspective of ADB and where you see potential gaps, it will be also interesting to, if there is a need out there that is not being fulfilled, the partnership is an instrument that it was created to provide that support or to do that matchmaking, right? So it's, I think, yeah, some reflections on the point, yeah.
No, thank you, and I'm sorry for putting you on the spot,
No
but it
problem.
was just an interesting statistics there. So Oleg, over to you. You know, from ICAT providing capacity building as well as knowledge platform and information, and you've heard our 3 country representatives at different stages of development of the MRV system. I mean, from your experience or from the work that you've done, can you provide advice on what are the requisite or the factors needed to actually strengthen or institutionalize MRV system in any country?
Thank you, Myra. I don't think that there's one size-fits-for-all solution could be available to any country because every country is unique in a way. But what I noticed that, this MRV frameworks and the idea to cover tracking of NDC progress, reporting on GHG inventories, inform governments on the progress, also on road towards SDG in 2030, assuming that the whole economy should be covered by that system. And that requires the collaboration between all the branches of the government, all the ministries, agencies, Agency for Statistics, for example, that's like a cross-cutting of Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Finance. And starting from top down, there should be a political will to create and make it up and running, this kind of MRV framework. And for that, it should be clear understanding that that kind of instrument is not only for the reporting, it's also for, it can be considered like a control panel or the dashboard for the government, allowing them to see every moment where they are in terms of achieving the results and achieving the goals, short-term, medium-term, long-term. Having political will is not completely enough because then the immediate action that we see in many countries is to create interministerial committee or commission or national council on climate change, something like that. But then we see in many countries that that's the moment when it stops for the time being, and then we will see the problems like in New Guinea, where they have like mandate to gather data from different agencies, but there is no clear institutional arrangements between those agencies. So what we recommend to our countries in the framework of our projects is to turn MRV guidelines that we develop into climate law or amend climate law, but by annexing MRV guidelines, where all the processes, procedures, data collection protocols will be a kind of cast in stone, and then everyone would know who is responsible for what and when to collect data. So that would be one really strong recommendation probably for everyone. And we have quite successful examples of when our work was also turned into the climate bill or climate law in some of the countries. And now they have less trouble in collecting data from different agencies. Another way, and that probably would be the next step, is to delegate MRV authorities from Ministry of Environment to line ministries. Because, for example, if Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for gathering data for national GHG inventories, they just collect the activity data, deliver it to the Ministry of Environment without clear understanding what is the purpose of this act of collecting activity data and hand it over. Whereas if there are going to be a department of climate change in the Ministry of Agriculture, they would feel the ownership for the work they do. And they would be more engaged in the process and more interested in using this data in formulating the climate policies in agriculture sector. So that's another nice way of engaging stakeholders, because that's another important topic that come across all this MRV framework discussion, that engagement of stakeholders is a key. And maybe the last solution, the last suggestion to all the countries would be is not to consider the setting up of MRV framework that as a one-off act. It should be considered as a long process with aiming to improve MRV framework through the year. So start with the simple things, cover the main sectors, main emitters in economy, in GHG inventories, and then amend it, expand it, build capacity. So that would be my suggestions.
Actually, Oleg, those are very good suggestions. May we also suggest the other pavilion to actually quiet down a bit if they can actually hear us? So anyway, thank you, Oleg. And I think what you said, no one size fits all. It's a crucial element, but also laws. Integrating MRV systems into laws is actually also a critical element to ensure that countries approach it in a more holistic approach. So coming from that advice, Ms. Nona, I've seen that the MRV system, at least for some sectors, are quite well established already in Armenia. But what are the challenges that you've seen or some of the lessons learned when you have implemented the MRV system so far?
Thank you, Esmera. According to our government program, up to 2024, we have to picture whole MRV system in Armenia. And now UNDP helping us to get this picture within the SBIT program. But for sectoral level, I would like to say big thank for ADB partners because they are helping now us. We have ongoing project and they are helping us to go more deeper and deeper in sectoral to do sectoral MRV, mainly in energy sector, which is very big, and waste sector. But we do not have some results now. Project ongoing, not started yet.
Ms. Nona, have there been difficulties in terms of data collection across ministries, or has it been quite fluid?
We have capturing draft government decree. We now have government decree. It's waiting for approval. We can have from data collection, we can get data from our line ministries, but it is difficult to get data, for example, stakeholders, mainly about finance. We cannot get solution to get finance, information on finance from NGOs now. It's a very big gap for us.
No, thank you. And I think other than capacity building, it's financing that's actually also lacks or is limited in terms of resources.
We need capacity building whole in these MRV issues, not about just financing, because it's a new one, and capacity building the main core of this work.
Okay, no, that's understood. Yes. So for Jason, a similar question to you. You have started implementing the MRV in your own country, and you have also stated that it is integrated in some of the national policies and programs. What kind of challenges have you experienced, and some of the lessons learned from those challenges when you implemented the MRV system in your country?
Thank you. Sorry, it's okay. No worries. I heard the question. So some of the challenges that we faced during the implementation of the MRV after we've institutionalized the process. When we institutionalized the process, one of the main issues that we faced was data. I mean, the first two, for the national communications and first national communications, second national communications, there was no records of that. we didn't have any data, no institutional memory whatsoever, so we had to start from scratch. And that was one of the huge challenges that we faced, to start where to collect the data from, who to collect it from, what type of data to collect. So we sort of took us a lot of time, quite a huge time to do that, collect the data again, and basically collect the data again. So one of the lessons learned from that is to, okay, let's try to at least have a archiving system or something, institutional memory. So in future, when it's going to be easy for us to for the future. And the archiving system also has to have some sort of set of consistent estimation files. So I think that's where ADB was also able to support us in that area, a consistent estimation file. So, and then it's easy to update once we collect those statistics. I think there was not much documentation also in the past, so we've now tried to put at least some documentations. Okay, this is where we collect the data from. This is the areas that are missing from our current inventory. But also some of the lessons learned, and we've also tried to make improvements on. But like I said, it was only for the mitigation area, not really the adaptation and support received. I'm sorry, the second question was also on policies. With the
Some of the lessons learned.
Okay, I think I've already answered that question. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. So that's a difficult start. No data, no baseline, and you have to struggle to actually get to the level that you are now. Now, similarly, for Tajikistan, so far, what kind of challenges are you experiencing in terms of the development of the MRV system?
You hear me? Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I think the same similar situation in Tajikistan, like in Armenia with our colleagues. So since the MRV system just is developed, based on enhanced NDC. So for Tajikistan, it's also the key main challenges are lack of institutional capacity, also lack of methodological and institutional framework, as I mentioned above, and also lack of capacity. Among the key stakeholder actor of national economy, who should provide periodical report. I think these key changes will be addressed during the next step of the process with NDC adoption and implementation. So these key changes we are going to include in the next step of NDC implementation. MRV implementation process. In order to, starting from 2030, to start, a proper tracking of progress against implementation of our commitment under the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go back to you, Turakul, and to many of our panel members. Because much of the MRV system, and of course under the Enhanced Transparency framework of the UNFCCC, we talk about more on the mitigation sector, right? Because it's a GHG inventory, GHG emissions accounting. But especially for countries like Tajikistan, Armenia, and PNG, you are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And for example, Tajikistan and PNG has very low emissions to begin with. Do you think when we're measuring progress, is adaptation a priority? And what kind of sectors do you think should be included in that measurement?
Perfect.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, it's perfect timing. Yeah, thank you, Ismaira. Really, it's, as you mentioned, we are one of the lowest GHG emitter. So our NDC enhanced and NDC implementation plan, and it's mainly focused on adaptation measures. so which cover more than 80 activities related to 80 actions on that. So also, as Tajikistan is an agrarian country, also the agriculture sector also is the main source of GHG emission. That's why also we are going to include or to see, and MRV process framework also to receive that also from agriculture sector. I mean, the agriculture is a key sector for our economy. So main adaptation measures are goals under the agriculture sector. That's why also it will be considered under new enhanced MRV system. Thank you.
Thank you, Turakul. Similar question to you, Jason. On the adaptation side, and I'm pretty familiar with the PNG NDC a submission that adaptation actually figures in much to that. So in terms of reporting, how do you see adaptation figures in?
Yeah, I think you said adaptation is also part of our NDC targets. So there's like four main sectors. There's transport, infrastructure, health, and agriculture, mainly food security. But I think in terms of tracking the progress, it also goes back to how the lead agencies actually track the progress. Like whether do they have the capacity of getting the relevant statistics required to track the progress of the impacts of adaptation within those sectors, and also whether we're making some progress to address those impacts. So I think that's a gap, sort of was a challenge, because to be honest, to be frankly honest, I don't really think there's much capacity in terms of tracking the relevant statistics within that sector. Like for the especially climate change relevant. So I think it goes back to the one of the points raised by sorry for forgetting the name. Yeah. So you also raised the point that we need to have some climate change officer sitting within that agency, so that to also understand the relevant data that we might need to track the progress of adaptation activities within those sectors. I mean, that's sort of one of the way forward that I see. Thank you.
So a focal actually helps. Ms. Nona, from your side, in terms of tracking adaptation?
Yes, we have chosen. We have vulnerable for climate change. We have fourth vulnerable country in the region. And in point of view, MRV, very difficult. We have chosen 7 sectors. In point of view, MRV, very difficult to understand, to discuss indicators, because now we are working on it on format, and we have to understand which indicators, because they are huge, and we have to choose the indicators.
So identifying the indicators and choosing from those. So switching the question a bit for ICAT and NDCP, from your point of view, in terms of MRV with respect to adaptation, what kind of platforms or support have you seen or are you currently doing with your engagement across different countries? Oleg, I'll start with you.
Sorry, for adaptation, you mean? Yeah, I fully share the frustration of previous speakers about monitoring and evaluation of adaptation measures, because it's a completely different animal compared to mitigation. And in our portfolio of projects, we have much more countries we support to build capacity and to set up the MRV framework for mitigation rather than for adaptation. And because also for mitigation, you have methodologies and tools that are applicable across all the countries. Context of always is different, but those tools are applicable across all the countries. For adaptation, it's very country-specific. Sometimes even within the country is a region-specific, So what we found helpful is to work with the countries that already have national adaptation plan in place. That's a very good starting point to elaborate on the actions, and then those actions could be turned into meaningful indicators. And then those indicators could also be embedded into NDC tracking framework. So that's probably the easiest way for us, but to develop the national adaptation plan for the country is also a big challenge. So yeah, what make probably sense, we have nice experience with Kenya climate smart agriculture framework that they developed, and that was to consider mitigation co-benefits into the climate smart national agriculture policy. So that creates synergies between mitigation and adaptation, and it was much easier to find the meaningful indicators to track the implementation of the strategy. And also, just maybe if that would help to the countries, I'd like to promote some of our tools that are available on the ICAT website. You can go and download it. One of them is to how to incorporate or to engage stakeholders in the M&E process for adaptation, and the important role of subnational actors in that process. And another is the tool developed for South Africa is to how to assess the impact of loss and damage, which is related topic. Yeah. So that may help to countries to set up the M&E framework. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning loss and damage. That's another level of monitoring and evaluating the impact of that. But Joaquim, similar question in terms of adaptation.
Hello. Thank you. And I think in the adaptation sector, that's where I think the linkages with development become very, very, very strong. As I mentioned, we provide a lot of support to countries, low-income countries, middle-income countries, and for many of them, adaptation is the key priority. As you mentioned before, like the levels of emissions are very low. Of course, they want to track, they want to also go for a transition, but in adaptation where we have most of the impacts. And I think one interesting perspective and also an experience that I had in a previous position working in Brazil, but also later is currently being discussed in other countries, is how do you use systems to monitor impacts of climate change linked to planning and budgeting processes. And it's a very, I think the experience was very interesting because it's in the southern state of Brazil, and it's the region that is most affected by climate change. It's the only region where you have like cyclones, you have like a lot of floods throughout the years. And basically the process was structured in a way of like observing how the climate change impacts were disrupting financially the states. So the fiscal capacity, the allocations of budget. And then because of that, what happened is started first the physical assessment, the vulnerabilities, so in a geographical information system. And then over time, started understanding where the spending of the government was going to and where the impacts were being felt. So it's not only a tool to monitor and say, observe like the physical and the impacts, but also to see where you allocate your resources and how you allocate, and if you are putting your money where the impacts are happening. And I think this notion of linking very strongly the component of like the adaptation reporting with the planning, with the budgeting, assumes a very important perspective, especially because we don't know exactly how climate change will unfold in many regions. So you can use that as a management tool, you can use that as a system to gradually improve the quality of the data, but also try to minimize the impacts that countries will be having, not only physically, but also economic and financially. So, and this, based on this experience, now there is a work that is being done in Mozambique. We have even had an exchange currently here with other countries in the region, and there is also interest to start kind of doing more this type of approach of really linking adaptation reporting with planning and budgeting instruments and using that as a management tool for mitigating, reducing impacts in the aftermath of events. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. But follow-up questions for both you and Oleg. So there are lots of tools that are being developed, are already developed, and there are a lot of platforms that are already out there, not just from the mitigation side, but there are some on the adaptation side as well. How do you get this to developing member countries, to developing countries in general? Because I've seen is that, unless you go and, participate and become an audience and platforms like this, like I've learned a couple of things from Oleg today about some of the tools that ICAT have. How do you actually promote, or how do you get the message out there that there are these tools that they can access and actually use?
Well,
Is it for you?
Oleg, yes, please.
So one of the important component of transparency is the stakeholder engagement, right? So we have a community of practice. We keep all our countries together. We have gathering, we have exchange between the countries. That really helps. It's not only top-down capacity building from international experts to the country. Sometimes it helps to, share experience between the countries to share how they overcome the challenges that they have had. And then in our country projects, we always promote the use of our tools. We don't insist on use of our tools. We say, okay, that's your need. For that need, we have a tool. Please try it. If it works for you, you can really implement it and continue using it without us. If you need to build a capacity for national experts, we will provide international experts who will build capacity in the country, and they will use this tool continuously. So that's our approach.
Oh, thank you. Joachim, for NDCP?
Yes, that's a very good question. And one of, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have 100 developing and implementing partners that are members of the partnership. And all of them have not only an MRV, but in many different topics, a lot of resources, tools, funding opportunities, and windows. So for that, what we created, of course, as a response to our country's request, was to build like what we call our knowledge portal. So it's basically a platform where you can put, like, you go in a website and what is the topic, what is the region, what exactly you want to find, and then you can see all the resources that are out there. So that's kind of like an infrastructure that can be used, and we promote for our members to see what is out there and what are the resources and how can they access those resources. The second one, I think, is peer-to-peer exchanges. I think those are super important, and it's a very powerful tool for countries to, especially those that are leading this process, to be able to talk to each other, to understand what are the challenges, what are the solutions, how they are dealing and overcoming those. And the third one, that is something that also we learned in our knowledge work, is also that, like, and I think that's related to what Oleg was saying as well, just providing the tool, it's important, but many times you need to have the in-country capacity to be able to have the uptake and to be able to implement those recommendations or guidance or tools at the national level. And in that context, one of the things that we've learned, and we have currently in different topics, not only in MRV, but more than 150 advisors, is like having embedded advisors. So instead of having fly-in, fly-out consultants, and then of course through our members, having consultants that are working with the government for a longer period, and as part of, like, not only bringing the additional capacity and expertise, but also building their capacities as part of the assignment. So the idea is to strengthen the national institutions to be able to take that role afterwards, but also providing this on the ground capacity building as well. So, and those resources also usually having networks amongst those type of experts is something that is beneficial, because they can also provide this cross-fertilization across different countries.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think NDCP and ICAT are great platforms, actually, as to coordinate as well, to ensure that the members have additionality in terms of providing support to specific countries because of that chart. And I've seen that chart. So, sometimes we don't know that another, UNDP is already providing the same support that, doesn't provide any additionality. I just wanted to double check if the online people can ask questions. Is that a thumbs down? No. Okay, so I'm sorry. But for people who are here, do you have any questions before we make oh, okay, there is a question.
Thanks so much. This was great. My name's Evan Lieberman. I'm a professor at MIT, and I've been trying to study climate-related policies across countries for a while. And coming to this panel is reassuring because I found it so frustrating to be able to compare policies that there just isn't great data, particularly in the developing countries. Whether it's, particularly for adaptation, but also for mitigation. Now, I just came from this panel, and I don't know if you all are familiar with the Climate Action Tracker. There are these, websites and, ranking systems out there, and, one of the things we hear just around COP is, governments aren't doing enough on mitigation, and, all governments aren't doing enough on adaptation. And, and that's probably right. But from what I look at and what I'm hearing from all of you, there's one of the things we might say is, well, we think so, but we really don't know, because we just don't know what governments are doing. There's so little data. When one tries to figure out what any single country is spending, like South Africa, for instance, which is a pretty highly developed country which has pretty sophisticated reporting, it's mind-blowing, trying to put together, because you have multiple layers of government, and the budgets are not transparent in terms of what's being spent on adaptation or mitigation. It's buried in so many areas. So I guess my question is, what's the response to people who are out here talking about what the, insufficient policy frameworks are, and both the, the policies and the implementation, when what you're saying here is we don't have the data, we don't know. How could they know if you all don't know? So I guess that's my question.
Who would like to take the question? Quite difficult, huh?
No, I can start. It's rather statement than the question. But I agree. And also, if we look at global stocktake, right, we are definitely not on the right track to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And on the other hand, we are receiving a lot of new commitments, pledges. We see a lot of strategies, carbon neutral by 2060, carbon neutral by 2050. But then that means that there is a big implementation gap between those strategies and action on the ground. And that gap has to be breached by many things, and data and transparency is just one component of it. That's why we are all together here to help countries to build a data system that would really connect the private sector with the government, or technical experts in the government with the decision makers in the government. Because to me, that sometimes doesn't exist. And therefore, those national strategies, they look very nice, but they're very high level. They are not supported by roadmaps, they are not supported by investment plans, and investors would like to see the impact that they would receive after investing in a particular project in the country. And all of that can be supported by data, and data exists in the countries. It's maybe not credible, not always reliable, but it exists. The issue is how to collect it and how to make it consistent.
What was mentioned in terms of understanding a little bit also where the different countries stand and what their priorities are and how they progress. So I think NDCs, the first round of NDCs, many of them put up like super fast, and like, especially in developing countries, maybe fly in, fly out consultants, the level of data, the quality. So I think that was one not necessarily involving all the different stakeholders across the government, building on the sectoral plans, the sectoral strategies. So I think that's something that improved a lot in the last round of NDCs. Of course, there's still room for improvement, but I think more and more there is the recognition that if those NDCs and long-term strategies are to be implemented, they have to have a very strong buy-in across government, but also, I would say, even more as a whole of society exercise. So I think understanding, I think that process is something that is one component that, like, we are, as a collective and countries, trying to think about a systemic problem, which is kind of like, I think, thinking historically, we ended up going for a very strong specialization and silos, and now we are forced to work in countries in a systemic way, but also across countries in a systemic way. So I think one point is like this element of defining those plans that are solid and are clear. I think the next wave, in my opinion, of relevance is like bringing very strongly the ministries of economy and finance and planning into the process of the NDC and LT-LED's design, because then you understand where and how this is aligned with the long-term development trajectory of the country. You understand to what extent those NDCs and commitments are feasible from a financial perspective, from a macroeconomic, macro-fiscal perspective. And then you can also build the systems that are anchored into the national core processes in terms of planning, budgeting, and reporting as a role. So I think that's one thing. The other point that Ole mentioned that I think it's very relevant is that, so that's a wave, then is a unpacking of these NDCs in actually plans, and that's where, as a partnership, we have been working with several countries, more than 40 countries, to really help them. Okay, there's a target, but how do you achieve that target? What are the policies that you need to put in place? What are the resources that you need? Where these resources need to go? So kind of like this unpacking. And now also very strongly the wave of like finance, so getting resources to be able to implement. And I think the implementation gap is definitely there, and I think that's where a lot of focus needs to be put from now on for us to be able to come into Brazil, have like a stronger NDCs and start setting the pathway towards net zero and more resilient society. So a few, not maybe a response, but a few observations and reflections.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up questions? Are you okay? No, thank you so much. So we're about to meet the hour and a half. So I'm going to ask one last question, and I'm going to give each one just 1 minute to respond. We all know that MRV is important. Reporting on progress made is important, and actually it also tells us or provides us information what kind of solutions and what kind of resources that are still needed to get us to that final climate outcome. So from each one of you and from your experience, can you identify one critical challenge or problem that you still have or that you still see, and what kind of solution is needed to solve that problem? So I think it's an easy question because I know there's a lot of challenges. Let's start with Turakul, please.
Thank you, Smira. Really, you're right. So now we're at the beginning of putting in place an MRV system. So now it's one of the biggest challenges, lack of, as I mentioned above, it's a lack of institutional capacity. That's why we have to improve or rise capacity building among key stakeholders. It already mentioned by Oleg and Joachim, we have to improve the capacity of key actors of this system, so including the line ministry, Ministry of Economy, Agriculture, all line ministry and agency. So it's the top priority for us. So taking this opportunity, I would like to announce that today we are going to conduct jointly with ADB at 3:30 presentation of our NDC financial plan in our Tajikistan pavilion. I kindly invite all of you to join this session. So we are going to present the NDC financial plan, so how we are going to implement and to achieve our commitment for the period of until 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Turakul. Jason, please.
Yeah, I think one critical problem, I think, for us is the understanding the reporting requirements under the Article 13, especially those for those ones under the Katowice and also Glasgow. Really trying to understand those reporting guidelines, LPGs. That sort of is a big issue for us. And also, in addition to that, the different methodologies like the IPCC guidelines or new methodologies for reporting, tracking progress of adaptation, if there's a methodology for that. For us, I think we really need to understand those and develop local capacity, basically. And I think the best solution for that is the technical assistance that we seek should be more focused on developing the experts of the local experts, more or less like the learn by doing approach. So the technical assistance, some consultant, guiding our local expert through the process, learning going through the guidelines so that the local expert understand the guidelines. Also the methodology is different. So it's more or less a learn by doing approach for sustainability. And that's how I see how we can solve this problem.
No, thank you very much. So just basic understanding and having a more focused technical support is critical. Ms. Nona?
For me, insufficient coordination is challenge. For that, we have to institutionalize the process and improve capacities, and will also. Thank you.
No, yeah. No, sometimes we forget about how difficult it is to coordinate sectoral various ministries and to get them to comply with the requirements under the UNFCCC. So thank you for highlighting that. Oleg?
Because I agree with all the challenges mentioned before about institutional capacity and coordination. One point that I wanted to add basically to the previous question is that many policies and many measures included already in the first round of NDC didn't anticipate any monitoring framework. And that's why they are not implemented in a coherent way, and the policymakers are not informed back on the progress. So that's the challenge, and that should be changed. And it's not really difficult to change when you develop the new policy or measure to incorporate the monitoring mechanism in it already with the indicators. Because what we see now that, okay, we have a list of, in a country, suppose, we have a list of measures that's included in our mitigation part of NDC, but there is zero indicators to track the progress, and they are asking us to set up the MRV framework to track the NDC progress, and that's like starting almost from scratch. Thank you.
Thank you. Joaquim? Last words.
Institutional capacities, coordination, the integration. I think the only, maybe connected to that, I think is the clarity on the climate development rationale. So that it is, especially for, I think, smaller countries with less capacity, it's not that you are providing the data because someone agreed and then you need to report on that for the UNFCCC, but how this data is relevant for your national priorities and how you can use that to better manage your resources and your actions. So I think that would be the only point that I would add. And yeah, access to finance.
Access to finance.
Yeah.
We have the head of finance from NDCP, so anyone requiring finance. Now, again, on behalf of ADB, can we actually have a round of applause for our great panel? Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for those who are here, and thank you for those who have either woke up early or are staying up late to join this side event. So thank you very much.